As Aaron said, I was a pastor for a number of years until they decided to get rid of me. No, I actually resigned in my master's program at Fuller Seminary, and I did finish the construction. I feel like I'm going out here. Is this okay? Come down here? Okay. Is that better? Is that good? Okay, here we go. And where was I can't remember what I did 5 minutes ago, so you got to help me out here. Yeah, so I finished my program, but I ended up going back into construction, which I was doing previously, and I recently retired from that, or as my family says, I retired because I'm still working for them just a few hours a week. But it's a joy to have the time, actually, now to decide what I want to do with the rest of my life. And I'm sure that some of you, many of you who are in my stage of life, either looking at retirement or having been retired, you're wondering, what does God have for you? And during this series, hopefully, the series on spiritual disciplines, we've given you some tools to help you in that journey. And these kinds of spiritual disciplines that we've been going through are actually not your typical ones that you hear about, but I think that they're much more valuable in that they're a foundation for how you are to live your life at whatever stage you're at, whether you're working, whether you've got a young family, or whether you're retired like me. And this morning, it actually is the last in the series, and we're going to be moving on to a different series next week, or actually in a couple weeks, I believe. This morning, I wanted to talk about the spiritual discipline of connecting with creation. And this is, again, the last in the series. And all of these, including hopefully what I share today, will lead us to an increased life with God and a better understanding of ourselves and the world around us. And my main goal this morning is to help us connect closer to God, to understand our God-given responsibility to take care of the world around us, the environment, the creation, nature, however you want to word it, and understand that creation can heal itself if we take the right steps. We have a God-given responsibility to take care of God's creation. And we're going to talk about that, and hopefully it'll make sense to you. For us personally, it became a very personal journey for us. 1995, we were asked to become directors of an environmental facility down in Belize at a place called Jaguar Creek. And I have some slides to show you. And Jaguar Creek was literally set in the middle of the rainforest of Belize. And we were miles away from pretty much any civilization. Our nearest neighbor was another eco-resort about a mile and a half away. And some of you, if you ever watched Survivor series, if you're a fan, back then, actually, they were one of the locations for one of the Survivor series. But Jaguar Creek is where we stayed. It was, like I said, it was an environmental facility. We were in charge of maintaining it. It was actually run off of solar panels. It was, at that time, again, this is 1995. So today we have solar panels all over the place, but back then it was the 4th largest solar array in the world. And we had the privilege of being there. It was a life-changing experience for us. And it wasn't an easy decision. We had 2 kids that were 10 and 7. And by the way, my daughter Kelly, who is no longer 7, I won't tell you how old she is, but she's an adult, and she's with us here today. And my son also is watching via Zoom. So it's nice to have the family support you and actually want to listen to you, which isn't often the case. But Jaguar Creek was a life-changing experience for us. And we were immersed in a totally different world, up close and personal, with nature. And sometimes it was very raw. And we came into that environment, and actually, when we first arrived, we were told that we had 2 weeks to prepare until some students came, because we housed a school. It was a remote school from the United States for a semester at a time. And when we arrived, all of those buildings that you see there had mold covering every single wall. Because had been about a month a month where nobody lived there. And when we arrived, we were the first people back there. And so basically, the jungle decided to take over that place. And so we saw nature in its rawest form. And we decided that we were going to tackle nature. And so we scrubbed every single wall with bleach. And, coming with our North American mentality, right? So we scrubbed every single wall, got it ready, and then the students came. But we experienced just incredible things. It's like it was out of a National Geographic movie, literally. We had, walking along the side of the sidewalks were a freeway of leafcutter ants that we could watch. And in fact, our kids were being homeschooled at that time. And you know what their science class was? Going outside and watching the leafcutter ants and watching all the birds and the wildlife that just literally surrounded us. And it was a lesson for us that even though we try to control the things around us, God will find his own way. And I remember there was a time when there's an insect called army ants. Have you ever heard of army ants? I don't know if we have them around here, but they're prevalent in the jungles of Belize. And the way that you can tell when they're coming around is you see all these birds flying around like haphazardly in the air. And it's because this row of army ants, like marching through the jungle, is disturbing all the insects. And so the birds are having a field day eating all those insects. And at first, when they started to come through the buildings, we got out our bug spray, right? We're spraying it around everything. And then we soon realized, and after some of the locals told us, hey, don't worry about it. Because you know what? Those army ants, you know what they do? They're scavengers. And so they'll clean out all the bugs and the things that you actually don't want in your cabañas. And so after a while, we decided we'd leave them alone. And they did their job, and we let them do their job. It's not about trying to control the world around us. It's trying to understand the world around us and working with the world around us. And there are 3 parts to my message this morning. First of all, I want us to appreciate nature, appreciate God's creation. Second, I want to see how we can connect, or how we should connect with creation. And then the third thing is action that we can take. So first of all, as we consider how we can appreciate God's creation, Psalm 8, 3 and 4 says this: when I look up at your skies, at what your fingers made, the moon and the stars that you set firmly in place, what are human beings? that you would think about them? What are human beings that you would pay attention to them? You catch here a sense of humility that we ought to have as we look at God's creation. Psalm 19 says this, the heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of his hands. St. Francis of Assisi says this, he says, nature is the mirror of God. So when we look at creation, in a very real sense, we're looking at a reflection of God and his character. I remember when our kids were little, we went up to a lake and stayed in a cabin up there. It's Alpine, Lake Alpine, just above Big Bear. And, we didn't have many opportunities at that time living in, the suburbs of the Bay Area to actually really get out away from all the lights and everything. So I just remember the first night that we were there, we took a hike, our whole family, and we went down the road with flashlights, of course, and there were absolutely no lights around us. And so at some point, I just realized, this is amazing. It was one of those, now, those of you who are my age, you'll remember this phrase, Kodak moment, right? Well, it was one of those Kodak moments, and in fact, I told the kids, and at that time I understood because this is way back when, but I said, okay, guys, everyone, just get down on the ground. What? Lay down on the ground? Somebody could come and run over us. No, just nobody's going to be around. Just lay down on the ground. So we all laid on our backs. We shut off our flashlights. We just stared up at the sky. And I said, okay, guys, this is a Kodak moment. Just look at the sky. Look at all the stars. And up there, you can see what you can't see down here, right, with all the lights. It's just an incredible array of stars and moon and everything. And these are shots that are even more amazing about the creation above us. And these are taken from the James Webb telescope that has recently been installed up in orbit. And this is the Carina Nebula. It's a star-forming region, and that's what's causing all these cloudy areas, these peaks and valleys of clouds. The next one is a picture of, now these look like stars, right? But they're not. Most of these are galaxies. Each galaxy, like the Milky Way, has approximately 200 million stars. And they estimate, these are the latest estimates, that there are about 2 trillion galaxies in the known universe. That's incredible. And when you think about that, yes, a lot of scientists believe that it all came from nothing. I believe it takes a lot of faith to believe that it came from nothing. We believe that God created this. Isn't that amazing? It just blows your mind when you stop to think about it. But the point is, we need to take that moment to stop and think about it. And I'm thinking, actually, I see Hazel over there. Hi, Hazel. She's totally embarrassed now, and she's turning red. And the reason why I'm bringing her up is because I understand your husband, Dan, is hiking part of the Pacific Crest Trail. I can't hear you. I don't have my hearing aids in, sorry. But that has to be an incredible experience for him, and being able to see some of the scenes that we're talking about right now. But it's not only the greater, the spectacular scenes that we can see in the James Webb telescope and up in the sky, but it's also the wonder of creation on the microscopic level. My daughter Kelly went to Westmont College, and she studied microbiology there. And she would talk about the incredible intricacy on the micro level of creation. So not only do you have the macro, but you have the micro, miraculous, amazing, tremendous creation of God that we need to stop and appreciate. All of creation, from the tiniest protozoa to the vastness of the universe, should, upon reflection and understanding, inspire awe and wonder and put us back in perspective to our place in the world. And here I come back again to humility. And not only in these passages in Psalm 8, but also in other passages, what does God always do? He puts us back in our place where we should sit in humility, which was one of our other spiritual disciplines, right? To have this posture of humility as we live in this world. It means we understand our place, and it also means that we are designed to be connected to creation. So we want to look at that, our connection. And another story, I'm going to tell a few stories, if you didn't realize that already. Well, another story about camping. We like to go camping as a family as the kids got older. And one of our favorite places was Henry Cowell down in Felton. I see a lot of head nods there. Great place. It's a little harder to get reservations there now, but it's great because it's, you're out in nature, but at the same time, 5 minutes away, there's a McDonald's and Starbucks. So you can have the best of both worlds. There was a time when, a couple of years where I was still engaged, in work, and I couldn't get away. And so Jolie and Kelly would go and set up camp and stay there for the first couple of days, and then I would come. And I just remember calling from work like the second day, and I called Jolie and I said, "Hey, what are you doing? What's up?" And she just had this. She just went, "Well, I'm just watching the leaves fall." And right then and there, I hung up the phone, and I got in my car, packed my things, and I went over there because she was doing what needed to be done, and I wasn't. And I needed to have that connection. We live in a world largely detached from God's creation that we should be connected to. It's a world of technology, convenience. It's a tame life. It's a controlled life. And we're missing out on a huge, important chunk of life that God meant. There's a quote from Henry David Thoreau. "I love nature, partly because she is not man, but a retreat from him. None of his institutions control or pervade her. There is a different kind of right prevails. In her midst, I can be glad with an entire gladness." And, sometimes, we love fellowship, right? We love our families. We love connecting with them. But a lot of times, it's good to get away from all that. It's good to get away and reconnect with God's creation itself. And so 2 things need to happen. We need to disconnect from our everyday life and the stress that we can experience, whether it's from work or home, school, relationships, etc. And then we can connect in meaningful ways. And I love hiking in local parks. I had knee surgery, so that's kind of limited my ability. But I used to go 3 or 4 times a week to some local parks. And although I bring my phone, I usually try not. It's only in emergencies, just in case I fall and trip and I need to call somebody. But I usually try to not answer any texts or any phone calls, which is really hard to do, right? Because it's like an umbilical cord. We're connected to that. I'm connected very much so to that. But I take the time intentionally when I go on those hikes to disconnect from those things. And that's really important. Connecting with creation puts God and our lives in perspective. It puts ourselves in perspective in relation to the world and to God. In other words, it humbles us. And remember what the psalmist said in verse 3 and 4? What are human beings that you think about them? What are human beings that you pay attention to them? You see, in some ways he's saying, we're nothing compared to God's creation. We think we are. We think we are God in a lot of ways, and in the ways that we try to control our world. And our concept of being in control is to do what we want. But we ain't. We ain't God. We're ants. We're just little tiny things in the grand scheme of God's creation. And it's only the privilege that God loves us. God cares for us as created in his image. When I see myself next to the pounding waves off the Pacific or the towering peaks of the Sierras, I am surprisingly at peace. And I'm sure many of you have experienced the same thing. Scientists are discovering how important this connection is. I mean, we can read it in Scripture and we can experience it, but science is now confirming a lot of these things. It's confirming the significant mental health benefits from connecting with nature and with creation. Research from psychologists have discovered mounting evidence that nature has benefits for our physical and mental health. And I mentioned in the email blurb, if you read that this last Thursday, our family took a trip to the coast this last week. And as we headed up the Santa Cruz Mountains into the green canopy of trees and breathed in the moist air because it had just rained earlier that day, we had a visceral and immediate response to getting away from our daily lives and our technological cocoon and into nature. We felt it, we experienced it immediately. But I want to challenge us as followers of Christ who represent God on earth today. Connecting with creation is important to connect with God and for better health for ourselves. But we need to take a look at the underlying responsibility that God gave to us. And that is the call to be stewards of the earth. We need to do something critical to the future of our generations. And I have, for the past few years out of the ministry, I actually haven't been as connected to like some of the theological and political discussions from the church concerning the environment. I know at one time, like when we were involved back in the 90s and early 2000s, there seemed to be a rising push for the evangelical church to be involved in environmental issues. But somehow that got hijacked. That changed. And so I personally have not seen it, but I believe that there is a lot of discussion and movement in this area. Let's take a look at Genesis 1:26 to start. And this is just one, but I chose this as our text to help us understand our responsibility. Then God said, "Let us make humankind in our image, after our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the cattle and over all the earth, and over all the creatures that move on the earth." And the key word here is rule. And if you look at the use of the two Hebrew verbs that man is to rule over the animals as his subjects, it's often been mistranslated in the context of the language that is being used. Another translation used the word subjugate, to have dominion. And those words are loaded, right? It means, I'm in charge, I have authority, and I will do what I think is best, right? That is often what that word means. But when you look more closely at the original words that are used in the context of the Hebrew language, we should understand this word as not like a dictator, but as more like a benevolent or a loving leader. Man is also to walk among and have a relationship with nature so that they can provide for man and that man can learn from them. In other words, it's a complex, interchangeable ecosystem that we live in. But we have tragically erred as a species and individually and as a church, because the church historically has led the charge in subjugating the environment, having caused carnage in the world around us. And also we've done that individually as well, because we are part of this system. And when Jake was here, he was leading us through a lot of these issues that had to do with racial justice, with economic justice, and how these systems that we have and that we live in are unjust and are wrong, and are based on the wrong assumptions of what should be. Genesis 1:26, we misunderstand our responsibility, looking at nature as something to conquer and use from a consumer point of view. As we have become more urban and technologically oriented, we have lost our connection with nature and misunderstood our responsibility to it. Being stewards means we have the ability and the responsibility to do what? The right thing. And I know that that's what this church and what Jake has been preaching for the last 6 or 7 years in all things, including how we understand ourselves as stewards of this amazing earth. And it underscores the need for us to reconnect with our original design, to understand and appreciate creation, acknowledge our connection to it, and to re-engage with our call to be stewards. Dr. Randley Woodley and his wife Edith shared about 2 years ago at the pandemic their focus on reconnecting with Mother Earth. This was in a Zoom interview. He said, the values of the Western worldview will not sustain us through the coming generations. The Western worldview is at odds with a sustainable earth. We may seek to convert ourselves to a more indigenous worldview with indigenous values if we hope to retain our place as co-sustainers on the earth. The earth will no doubt survive. The question is, will we? As he speaks to these indigenous values, it calls us back to our original call, our original biblical call to be stewards of the earth, not consumers. The only job besides multiplying the earth, populating the earth, was to take care of it as he designed it. And we have largely failed because we are faced with climate change, global warming, environmental crisis. And as a church, this ought to be on our radar screen, right? At least that's what I believe. Because it's all tied in with everything else that this church stands for. We have to make it right. We have to. Now, some of us may not have that long. We may have a shorter time on earth. But what about the generations? What about our children, our grandchildren? What kind of world are we leaving them? And we need to think seriously about what we want to do individually and as a church to make sure that they have a world to live in. Gus Speth, environmental lawyer and top U.S. advisor in climate change, said this: "I used to think that the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change." He goes on to say, "I thought that 30 years of good science could address these problems. I was wrong." And you might be thinking the direction is to talk more about the scientific aspects and to address those things. And I will a little bit. But hear what he has to say. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with these, we need a cultural and spiritual transformation. And we scientists don't know how to do it. It's a scientist, a lawyer, saying this. At its core, climate change happened because it was the inevitable outcome of a consumer mindset bent on consuming the earth and the earth's resources. This is the colonial mentality that Dr. Woodley speaks to. We see something that we want and we take it with no regard to consequences. But this quote from Gus Speth helps us to understand it. Everything is connected. In the physical world, in the ecosystem, but also in the physical world and the spiritual world as well. We can't take nature for granted any longer. Our future generations need us to repent, to confess. And we're all a part of that system, right? All a part of it. And that's another one of the spiritual disciplines that we've talked about, right? Is confession. Heartfelt confession. And repentance, which is basically stopping where you're at, you're in a direction, and you stop and you turn the other direction. That's repentance. And that's what the church needs to do. That's what I need to do. That's what you need to do if we are to face this crisis together. You know, this church does a lot of amazing things, and we've been talking about that. If you missed last week's discussion, dialogue between Chizu and Paul, make sure that you take a look on Zoom. It was kind of a pause. It was a gut check. It was saying, where are we as a church? What have we been experiencing? What are the struggles? And what does the future look like for us? And the thing is, I know that probably many of you feel as I do. It's like, oh, what can I do? Everything, sometimes it seems overwhelming. And I know as we've gone through the past 6 or 7 years, a lot of these issues about social justice and economic injustice, they seem overwhelming, right? And it's like we hesitate to do anything because we don't know what to do. And my encouragement to you is, number one, we need to encourage each other. We need to stay together. We need to stay connected. But in regards to this issue, we need to reconnect with nature, with God's creation, so that we have the ability to hear and see what God is like and what He wants to happen today in this world. This has been a journey, to be honest with you, a journey for our whole family to come to this point. My wife had a dad that loved to farm in his backyard. How many of you have gardens in your backyard or front yard, wherever it may be? A lot of you. Hands raised in Zoom. I haven't acknowledged you yet. Okay, I see a couple. And her dad instilled in Jolie this love for farming, for growing your own food. And she carried that into our marriage. And that's actually one of the things that propelled us also to go down to Belize. And as we approached retirement over the last few years, we've thought about, and actually we're intentionally planning to move to someplace more out in the country, buy a couple of acres, because our property in Newark is worth a heck of a lot more than what we bought it for. So we were planning to move someplace to the country, a couple of acres, start a homestead, some goats and my favorite pigs, and grow some crops and so forth. But we always felt like, gee, that sort of feels selfish. It feels like we're just doing this ourselves and we're just, trying to retreat from the world. And so we always had this pull back and forth, this tug. And a couple of months ago, a colleague at work, he was all excited and he said, Mike, because he knew that we had a little garden in our backyard. And also we have chickens. We have 3 chickens. They all have names. And he recommended, in fact, he almost demanded, he said, you gotta watch this movie. It's called Kiss the Ground. And some of you may have seen this. It's a documentary that's out on Netflix right now. And I decided that our whole family needed to watch it. So on my birthday, July 20th, after dinner, we all watched it together. And I was floored because it felt like, all these things in our lives were like all of a sudden they were put together. Because let me just tell you a little bit about this film and about some of the principles, and then we'll move on. Kiss the Ground is a film that's focused on the recent environmental movement called regenerative agriculture. Lots of opinions about it. It's controversial because it encompasses so many issues of justice and economics and how we do food. It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry globally. And when you're talking about money, you're talking about influence and power in politics. And so it's become very controversial. But at its core, regenerative agriculture repairs the damage that we've done, and it makes it healthier. It repairs the damage that we've done to the soil, and it makes it healthier. It's based on science and has 2 main components that raises it above organic farming. Organic farming is totally in the right direction to eliminate pesticides, but it's more than that. It's about, where's the plant? I meant to bring a plant. Well, imagine a plant. Those plants back there. How do plants live? It's called photosynthesis. They pull the carbon dioxide out of the air, and then they release oxygen, right? That's photosynthesis in a nutshell, my simplified version. But there's a second part of this, of regenerative agriculture, that isn't often talked about. And it's called, what they call, it's carbon sequestration. It's basically holding carbon in the earth. And this is the other part that is so amazing to this process, is that when the plants pull the carbon out of the air, where does it go? It goes into the ground. And when carbon is in the ground, what is carbon? It's the building block of life. So what happens is when you increase the carbon in the ground, it increases the ability for that soil to house a biodiverse ecosystem in the ground, which makes for healthier soil. Guys, this is the way God designed it. Science didn't come up with this. God designed it this way. And we have totally forgotten. When we started our garden, by the way, I don't know if you gardeners have had issues, but we have issues every year with our garden. Mildew. Well, we also have ground squirrels, which I've been on a summer-long battle with, trying to figure out how to eliminate them from our yard. I wish we had some hawks or, to come down and swoop down, owls to get them, but we don't have those, so we do what we can. But where was I? Help me out. What? Garden, yes, mildew. I told you I can't remember what I did 5 minutes ago. So we've struggled with this garden, and we realized one of the main things that we've been doing is, like we bought this little mini tiller, and we, every year, ready to plant our garden, right? And we take that sucker out and we start tilling the soil like we're supposed to. But guess what happens when you till the soil? It releases that carbon out into the atmosphere. And if you watch that movie, there's a scene where one of the experts is showing a speeded up version of a satellite view of the Earth, and showing the amount of carbon in the air, carbon dioxide. And in the springtime, it's showing all kinds of carbon in the air. Because guess what? That's when all the farms are tilling. And then come August, it's a different color, because there's no tilling going on at that time. And so the first thing that I want to tell you is, if you have a garden, don't till anymore. And if you want to find out more, we can talk about that. But one of the things that I wanted to point out is that South Hayward Parish, that's what they're doing down there. Dan Johansson is leading the charge down there with an expert on hand to try to do it the right way. And they're having great success down there. Carbon sequestration. Keeping the carbon in the ground, increasing the health of that soil. And it's something that anyone can do. Here's the deal. The reason why I'm giving you this shortened version on soil science is because if enough people, enough farms change to regenerative practices, it can actually reverse climate change. Some people way smarter than I have done some projections. The French Ministry of Agriculture, called INRA, I-N-R-A, proposed that a 0.4%, not 4%, 0.4% of an increase annually of the amount of carbon sequestered or held in the ground would be the same amount released into the atmosphere by humans each year. So if we were to hold 0.4 in the ground more than we have the previous year, it will neutralize the amount of carbon dioxide we're putting out into the air. It's doable. It's doable on a political or global perspective, but also it enables you and I to do our little bit to help along the way. Sadly, the church, which should be leading the charge in this, isn't very involved addressing climate change. And it's slow to recognize the importance of regenerative agriculture. And there's another documentary that I recommend, this one from an indigenous point of view, and it's called Gather. We just watched that, and it is thought-provoking, and it helps you to understand not only the indigenous point of view, the things that they have struggled with, but it also relates to the possibilities that they are proposing that we can also practice and adopt for ourselves. Because they're all part of the same problem, they're all part of the same solution. Like I said, our church has been courageous to tackle some of the most controversial and significant issues of the day. And this is a quote from Joe Fassler, an author and journalist, because this is another one of those issues that needs to be tackled today. He says, make no mistake, in this something crucial is being negotiated. And he's talking about this whole principle of agricultural regeneration. The debate over regenerative agriculture means, and who gets to decide, spills over into the issues we care most about. It touches on our changing relationship to science and to technology, on access and antitrust reform, on workers' rights and racial injustice, on conceptions of the natural world and our place in it. It's a conversation that forces you to draw a bigger picture, only to realize that the circle isn't big enough. Climate change is about regenerating the earth. But folks, it's more than that. It's about regenerating the human spirit, the human soul. And guess who gave us a message about that? God did. And he sent Jesus to talk about what? The good news about the way life should be lived and the life that, or the present life that needs to be regenerated, and then we can move on and be the light and the salt of this earth, that city on a hill that Scripture talks about. I've decided, and I believe my family is too, that we want to explore what this means for us as a family. I'd like to see this church move in that direction as well. Because it's going to take all of us, not just here, but other churches as well, to lead the charge. And you know what? It may be that if we do, we could be a tipping point to help save this earth for the generations to come. Let me just talk about some personal things that you can do. You've probably thought about this already. But first, to connect or reconnect with nature and get perspective, listen to God, listen to creation. It can be while you're taking a walk instead of checking out your heart rate on your Fitbit. Don't look at that. Just take a look around. Even if you're walking on the sidewalk, look at some of the bushes and the trees and the birds, the wildlife, even on your city streets. that you probably missed before because you're focused elsewhere. Now, I suggest actually that you start taking hikes in the local parks. The East Bay Regional Park System has some fantastic parks, just a mere 10 or 15 minutes away from any one of us. Second, evaluate the choices you make and decide to make changes where you can. The next car or truck you purchase, consider an electric or a hybrid. We have 2 gas-driven cars. We're now looking at changing one of those into a hybrid. Pay attention to how stores source their food and other goods. If you have a vegetable garden, find out more about regenerative practices and start implementing them next year. Change the landscaping. Your landscaping can be regenerative as well. And that is a step above what has been pushed, which is drought tolerant, which is great, drought tolerant landscaping, but regenerative landscaping is a step above that. Consider buying your fruits and veggies at our farmer's market. There's one just down the street on Saturdays in Castro Valley. And I really encourage you to watch one or both of these documentaries that I mentioned. I talked with Paul, and if there's enough interest, we might have a showing at the Chabot. So if you would like that to happen, please contact the church in the contact card or let them know somehow, and we'll kind of take a poll and see if there's enough interest. And you can also contact me if you are interested in pursuing this a little further. I'm planning on taking some courses in regenerative agriculture, and I'd love for some of you to join me as well. I know this is a lot this morning, but I really feel that this is important. Not just important, it's critical to our future. And so I hope that you'll take this to heart, because I think it's a game changer, folks. It's a game changer for us individually, as a church, but as the world. And it's a way that each one of us can have our little way to impact something on a global scale. We pray with me. Lord, we just thank you for the way that you designed the earth and all of the universe so intricately, amazingly. We want to look at that, appreciate it, absorb it, connect with it, and realize that we are a part of that, and that you have called us to be stewards, to take care of it. And today, even more so, we have to do our part to undo the damage that we have done. So, Father, may you lay on us what you will, the desires of your heart, plant in ours. In Jesus' name, amen.